going to be recapping week number 6, talking about predictions for week number 7, and then of course talking about playoff scenarios, as well as some stats from week 6. And finally, because we are at the end of the season, it is also time to start acknowledging some awards that will be coming up here very shortly when the regular season does come to a wrap. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. So in week number 6, we had the Dream Park Duo Blades taking on the Infernal Infernapes, and the Infernapes did get that 2-0 sweep and 8 more KOs for Primarina. This is yet another series of unfortunate events for the Dream Park Duo Blades, where I just don't think that they're going to be able to get even a game win this season. I think they kind of were a little bit unprepared for this VGC draft experience, and while I do think that they are slowly improving, I think a part of the issue is, of course, bringing the same sets every single week does really hamstring you when every other coach is giving themselves a better chance by building specific teams that counter your strategies as best they possibly can. And yeah, overall, I just think that Universality has a little ways to go before they can match the level that a lot of the coaches here have already reached. That being said, Universality, if you are watching, or if anybody else that you know is here, make sure that you reach out to me, as I am always willing and able to help everybody in the league. It's harder when you're playing specifically against me, but if it's just to gain experience or a little bit of guidance about what Draft League and VGC specifically is like, I'm always here to help. Next up, we had the Season 4 Sweepers taking on the Booming Swampers, and the Sweepers did as their name implies, getting the 2-0 sweep over the Booming Swampers. After talking to 616 after this game, it seems like 616 felt like it was closer than it actually appeared, saying that he actually thought that he should have lost Game 2. And while I do think he made more mistakes in Game 2 than he has had in a lot of the rest of the weeks leading up to this point, I still think that he played fine, and I wouldn't be surprised if this game could have been a lot more one-sided. Even then, you did what you had to do, you got the win, and you remain undefeated after 6 weeks, which is very impressive, as no other team has done that to this point. Next up, we had the Manchester Bewears game versus the Cretaceous Draco Meteors. If you guys have not watched that yet, please make sure that you go ahead and watch that video for our match versus the Draco Meteors. But as a little spoiler, we did of course get that win 2-0. Your Manchester Bewears are locked in for the playoffs, and that is our 3rd win in a row in a sweep, which gives us excellent momentum heading into the playoffs. Of course, we got one more game to play, and it is versus that undefeated team that I mentioned before. So hopefully your Bewears can get it done. I am going to skip one game, and we'll circle back to it at the end here. So instead, let's talk about the LA Charge Beams versus the Sunset Rose Meowsticks. And the Meowsticks ended up getting that win 2-0 there. Pretty big sweep for the Meowsticks, as it puts them pretty far ahead in that playoff discussion. They are currently tied 2nd, although with losing to the Poke Rangers does put them in 3rd. And yeah, I mean, this was a pretty dominant win for the Meowsticks. Dragonite did really well. Politoed managed to pull off a Perish Trap, and of course Arachnid was as big a thorn in the side of the Charge Beams as I thought it would be. And I do think that JKG put up a pretty solid fight, and I think was a little bit handicapped by the fact that these are the exact same sets that he's been running for about 3 weeks now. Which, obviously, I understand that JKG has been busy, and when you're sliding into season, it's hard to want to continue making new sets, so I totally get it. That being said, um, still deserved win for Rose there, and a very clinical game that was executed very effectively. Finally, of the games that were played, we had the 10-star team versus the Calgary Flareons, with the 10-star team get a 2-0 victory there. Now this was a pretty one-sided game, and first I want to give the flowers to 10-star for winning before I get into my gripes for this match, as I think that this match was probably the most frustrating one that I've had to watch all season. But nevertheless, 10-star does keep his playoff hopes alive with this win. And yeah, nothing more that you can say about that. From a Celadon perspective, this was a pretty frustrating game where I thought you had a decent matchup and ended up fumbling the bag a little bit. This was definitely a winnable game, and it was even winnable with the suboptimal sets and suboptimal play that I was seeing, and yet it still managed to fall short. So from that perspective, definitely very frustrating, especially when you consider that 10-star yet again for the 5th week in a row has brought the exact same sets. That's something that I want to watch out for in the future. Like I said, I understand that it is really tough to play a season that's been going on for almost 2 months now. But at the same time, we have to all understand that this is something that you did commit to in order to play this much Pokemon, and for that reason, I do hope that teams going forward continue to make new sets every week, as it is a little bit frustrating, when you have some people who are committed to actually playing as much as possible, actually wanting to have fun with it, and you have people who are committed only a little bit and just show up with the same team every week. If you're wanting to do that, you might as well play on the ranked ladder of an online game where you could just bring the same team every game there. That being said, obviously nothing going to change there. It's really hard to police that without putting on too many restrictions to everybody. So, not gonna gripe on it too much, but just going to throw out a little bit of frustration there, as I do think that it is really tough to justify allowing some of these coaches to come back when they seem so very uninterested in playing the game. The final game that we have to talk about for this week is the Bitbreakers versus the New York Pokerangers. This unfortunately is the first and hopefully only forfeit game of the season, where the Pokerangers unfortunately did have to take a forfeit loss there, where because of a busy schedule, unable to accommodate a very different time zone, they ended up taking the forfeit there. This does make their playoff chances slide a little bit, and it does make their path to that first seed even more difficult, but they obviously do still have a chance, as basically everybody's destiny is in their own hands going into week 7. But with that being said, predictions for week number 6 was as accurate as I could have been, given that there was a forfeit loss there, where we got every game right except for the forfeit loss, where I did predict the Pokerangers to get that win, but unfortunately with them forfeiting, that is the one that we got wrong for week number 6. And that brings our prediction record to a astounding 26-10, meaning that we are well above 500, and it would take us getting every single game incorrectly on week 7 for us to get even close to 500 once again. Thankfully though, I do think that there are a lot of chalk games in week 7, so we'll go ahead and talk about predictions. First up, I am actually going to take the Charge Beams over the 10-star team. Both of these teams have been bringing the same sets every single week as of late. However, I trust JKG more as a coach, which obviously is a little bit shocking to say considering that Tensor is the defending grand champion. I do think that a lot of that is from just the experience that I know JKG has, but I've also seen a lot of apathy from Tensor after week 2, where you're just bringing the same sets every single week. And while if your team is better than everybody else's, you can get away with that. I don't think that that has borne out for Tensor. And on JKG's side, the other thing is that the sets that both of them have been bringing, I think does favor JKG a little bit more. Um, Hopefully JKG can get it done to make me look correct. If not, this is one of the least impactful games for playoffs, so we'll see if it ends up mattering in the end. The actual least impactful game for the playoffs is actually the next one, the Season 4 Sweepers versus the Manchester Bewears. Not for any playoff spots or playoff seeding. Both of these teams are locked into their spots, and this game will change nothing. However, it's not meaningless. I do think that there is a lot to be said for momentum going into the playoffs. And if a team can go into the playoffs 7-0, you can't get any more momentum than that, which is why, of course, your Beavers have got to take it down. But I also think that there is something to be said for if the Beavers can get this win, where 4 weeks in a row is still very impressive, and I do think that we've had the harder schedule over those 4 weeks than the Season 4 Sweepers have had all season. That being said, I do think that this is the hardest game for both of these teams, so it not having as much pressure should show us a very high level of gameplay, and hopefully we get to see a really nice one there in Week 7. But of course, I am going to be taking your Manchester Bewears because we got to get it done. Finally, we have in the Dark Division the Bitbreakers versus the Dream Park Duo Blades. I'm going to be taking the Bitbreakers here. I still think that the Duo Blades aren't going to be able to get anything done, and I'd be surprised if this wasn't a 2-0 sweep in the Bitbreakers' favor. Unfortunate to say, but I do think that they have pretty much got this locked in, and unless we see a big turnaround from Universality in the final week of the season, I think that they are just going to be swept the whole season. Nothing really more to say there. As we head over to the light division, we have the Calgary Flareons versus the Sunset Rose Meowsticks, and I am going to take the Meowsticks here. They have a playoff spot on the line, while the Flareons are trying to get their first win of the season. Although like I said, I have seen improvement from Celadon, I think that there's still a long ways to go, and Rose has proven that even with a suboptimal team, they are capable of competing, which is really nice to see, and I am excited to see what they can do in playoffs. I think the unfortunate truth is, if they get the 3rd seed, they are going up against your Manchester Bewears, meaning that they're going to have a really tough road to make a deep playoff run. But even getting the 2 seed, the Bitbreakers could be a difficult outcome for them as well. Looking on forward, we also have the Infernal Infernapes versus the New York Poke Rangers. This is technically for the 1 seed, although in order to get the 1 seed, the Poke Rangers do have to get this 2-0. If the Infernapes manage to win this game, or even if they lose it 2-1, basically you win a single game in the set, and you are guaranteed that 1 seed. So although, like I said, still impactful for momentum heading into the playoffs, if those Infernapes end up getting a game, it will no longer have any playoff implications, as the seedings will be locked in for them. That being said, for the Poke Rangers, you do want to get this win because you technically can fall behind from the Draco Meteors if they end up getting their win. And of course, you want to keep pace or stay ahead of the Meowsticks in order to keep your number 2 playoff spot. And finally, we have the Cretaceous Draco Meteors versus the Booming Swamperts. Sorry if I did not give a prediction there. I am actually going to take the Poke Rangers here. I think that Fluttermane and Hearthflame do present quite a few issues for their opponent. But I also think that Staraptor is a very powerful Pokemon in this set. So we will see how that plays out there. Now we can move on to the Draco Meteors versus the Booping Swamperts, where I think that this is pretty one-sided to the Draco Meteors, who are the better team in my opinion, coached by a very experienced coach. And while there is definitely some play that the Booming Swamperts can have, overall I think that they are pretty outmatched in the set, and will have to pull a few rabbits out of the hat in order to get this win. But with that being said, let's go ahead and check on our playoff scenarios. And there are a lot fewer playoff scenarios in the Dark Division, so let's go ahead and cover that first. Your 1 and 2 seeds are absolutely locked in. Your Season 4 sweepers are more than 2 games ahead of everybody else in the division, meaning that no one can overtake them in the final week of the season. So they are locked in for the 1 seed, even with a loss. And the same goes for your Manchester Bewears. Although we can't overtake the sweepers, nobody else can overtake us. Even with a 2-0 loss, it's only a 4-point differential sweep if we get a 2-0 loss and the Bitbreakers get a 2-0 win, meaning that we will still have the differential over the Bitbreakers, and that gives us the number 2 seed no matter what. And so it is a 2-horse race for that final playoff spot in the Dark Division, where all the Bitbreakers need to do is get a win and they are in. They can also make the playoffs if they end up losing to the Duo Blades, as long as Tensor also loses. With that being said though, if you're Tensor, in order to make playoffs you need to win and you need the Bitbreakers to lose. You absolutely cannot make playoffs if you lose, and you cannot make playoffs if the Bitbreakers win. And this is because even if the Bitbreakers get a 2-1 win, they will be at 4-3 with a +2, and the best that Tensor can do with a 2-0 win is 4-3 with a +2 as well. However, losing to the Bitbreakers earlier in the season does mean that they have the tiebreaker there, so it is impossible for you to overtake them if both of you win. So you need to win, and you need to hope that Universality turns this around and helps you steal the playoff spot from the Bitbreakers. So that is the Dark Division. Looking forward, in the Light Division, we have the Infernal Infernapes, who are locked in for playoffs. They get the 1 seed with a win, or as I said earlier, as long as you only lose 2-1. You get the 2 seed if you have a 2-0 loss, as long as the Meowsticks do not also get a 2-0 win, and you get a 3 seed guaranteed if both the Poke Rangers and the Meowsticks get a 2-0 win. If you're NYP, you can get the 1 seed with a 2-0 win, and you can get the 2 seed as long as you have the same record as the Meowsticks. So if you get a 2-1 win, as long as the Meowsticks only get a 2-1 win, then you are guaranteed the 2 seed, as you have that head-to-head tiebreaker with the Meowsticks. But you can still get the 3 seed if the Meowsticks manage to overtake you, as long as you have a better differential than the Draco Meteors, which cannot happen if the Draco Meteors end up winning. So what you have to do is win and get your playoff spot, or if you end up losing, you need to hope that at least the Draco Meteors or the Meowsticks end up losing so that you can keep your playoff spot. If you are the Sunset Rose Meowsticks, you cannot get the number 1 seed, unfortunately. The best you can do is the 2 seed. This is because in order for anybody to overtake the Infernapes, the Poke Rangers have to win 2-0. So even if you win 2-0, you can only tie with the Poke Rangers at 5-2 with +4. And then you are unfortunately losing the head-to-head, as the Poke Rangers did beat you earlier in the season. But you can get the 2 seed as long as you win and have a better differential than either the Infernal Infernapes or the Poke Rangers depending on who wins that. You can only overtake the Infernapes if the Poke Rangers get that 2-0, but you can also overtake the Poke Rangers as long as you have a better differential. So if they get a 2-1 win, you need a 2-0 win. If they lose, any win does let you overtake them. Now you can still get the 3 seed even if you aren't able to overtake the Poke Rangers or the Infernapes. So as long as you get that win, you guarantee yourself that playoff spot. Even if you lose, all you need is the Draco Meteors to also lose, and then you get to keep your playoff spot. And finally, if you are the Cretaceous Draco Meteors on the outside looking in, all you need is a win to make the playoffs, and you can get as high as the number 2 seed if both the Poke Rangers and the Meowstics end up losing their matches. So pretty tight race in the light division for all 3 of the playoff spots. In the dark division, a little bit more set in stone. As a quick reminder, the way that the playoffs are going to work is that both of our 1 seed teams will get a bye in the first round of the playoffs, where we will have the 2 seed from the dark division taking on the 3 seed from the light division, and vice versa on the other side, where we have the 2 seed in the light taking on the 3 seed in the dark. And that should lead us to a very interesting playoff race here. So that is very fun to look forward to, but of course we do have some stats to look at from week number 6. Of course, like we mentioned, Primarina getting those 8 KOs to go up to 30. We also saw a few KOs for Dragonite. I believe it was 3 in this match to go up to 19. Basque Legion F also ended up jumping the rankings, going all the way up to 17, and Golden Go got a few in order to jump up to 16. Some of the biggest risers though were actually on the Manchester Bewears, where we had Hariyama jump up to 14, and Iron Crown ended up grabbing 5 KOs to jump up to 11, so pretty big stuff for those 2 Pokemon. And continuing to look down, we had another big riser in Archaludon. We also had Iron Hands grab I believe just 1 KO in this match. And then Araquanid and Politoed continue to climb up just behind Dragonite, making sure that they carry their end of the team. So a lot of movement around the top of the tier list, but we also see that a lot of the lower down Pokemon ended up kind of staying in this area. You do see quite a few of the Dual Blades Pokemon here. You see a few of the Booming Swamperts Pokemon that have only shown up to a few games and have been left behind afterwards. And then you see a lot of support Pokemon in this 0 to 1 KO range, where they either did their job and won the games by doing their support, or ended up losing despite not being that impactful on the offensive side. As we keep going up, obviously you start to see more teams that are doing well, and I think that kind of tells you the story of how the season's going. The teams that are doing well have multiple Pokemon that are doing super well in the stats, which has kind of allowed them to continue to pile on these victories and pile on these stats, while the teams that are struggling ended up having a lot of Pokemon that are just kind of wallowing at the bottom of the stats, which this does tend to happen in a lot of leagues where some Pokemon just aren't able to get the stats, especially if they're on a team that is not performing super well. It's hard to get stats when you're losing, is kind of the narrative there. But the final thing that I want to talk about for today's video is the awards section. We have a lot of awards to give out. Of course, the one that is set in stone right now is the Dark Champion, so we're going to go ahead and put this in live. 616 is the recipient of the Dark Champion as the Season 4 Sweepers. Ended up guaranteeing themselves the number 1 seed in the Dark Division. With a very impressive 6-0 record so far. We'll have to see if they can make it 7-0 and potentially go for the perfect season here, or if they're gonna end up losing that final week and just be a very strong playoff team that everyone should be fearing. And we got lots of other awards to look at going forward. Um, Obviously, we're looking at the MVP, best offense, best defense, the best trade. There was actually a kind of shortage of trades this season, so not a lot of Pokemon actually competing for the best trade there, but I got a few in mind. Best match, there's definitely a couple matches that I have in mind for that. The one that's specifically on my radar is the New York Poke Rangers versus the Sunset Rose Meowstics in Week 5. That was a very awesome match to watch. But of course, we also have some less than stellar awards here, the Choker Collar and the most useless Pokemon. There are a couple of things that stand out to me for the Choker Collar. Of course, I'm really harsh on myself, so there are some scenarios where I would give myself the Choker Collar, but we'll see how everybody else feels. And there's definitely some standouts for most useless Pokemon that we will be nominating later on. And then, good or bad, we also have the biggest surprise. So this can be good in the sense of a team overperforming compared to where we thought it was, or bad in terms of a team underperforming compared to what we thought it would. And there are a couple of examples that I can mention. So, biggest thing to remember for these specific awards is that the same Pokemon and or same coach cannot win the same or more than one award. So essentially the best offensive Pokemon, it's going to be Primarina, cannot win the MVP. And this is just because we want to be able to shout out multiple Pokemon over the course of the season. Um, and that just comes down to every Pokemon deserves a chance to shine. And you can't really tell the entire narrative of a season by just acknowledging one Pokemon that ended up dominating the stats. This will change for the playoff MVP and, of course, the champion, as the playoffs are a separate story where we want to be able to tell if the league MVP during the regular season is the same as the playoff MVP, then that Pokemon deserves to get the shout for their performance during the season and during the postseason. Well, that is all I have for you for this week 6 recap. We did cover quite a lot, and I am starting to lose my voice, so hopefully you all did enjoy, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.